You're listening to Bigfoot Society, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. In tonight's episode, we'll hear what happens when a 5-year-old girl is lured into the forest by a rainbow-colored portal, and the creature waiting inside isn't what anyone expected. This is just the start of Leah's encounters, so you'll definitely not want to miss this one, so stay with us. All right, Bigfoot Society, I've got the privilege of talking to Leah today. Leah is an individual that heard a few episodes of the podcast and then reached out to share what she has experienced over the years. And it's a privilege to have you on the show today. Leah, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you.
Absolutely. I can't wait to hear the whole story. I know a little bit about it that you've provided, and it just sounds like a very interesting, almost spiritual journey that you're about to share with us. So feel free to take us back, as far as we need to go to lay the groundwork, and I'll let you take things over from here.
Yes, and thank you, Jeremiah, so much for having me on. I really appreciate that. This is wonderful. So when I was about 5 years old, I had an abusive older cousin, and I decided the best way to not have to deal with that anymore was to stand in front of a train. And I actually heard God's voice in my head telling my grandfather to go back and get me. And I saw the angel of death. And so it was a really close thing. And of course I was like, well, if you want me around so much, I'll give you my life. So I'm technically a bond servant for God. And I said, what do you want me to do? And he said, well, wear white and go live your life. I'll come and get you when I need you. And of course, I didn't do that. I was a little kid, and my parents would never put a kid like me in white. I was a tomboy. Now looking back, I think that being in God's presence, every time he saved me, it temporarily spiked my energy output, because all of a sudden, for a little while, I could kind of see and hear into the higher dimensions and some of the different entities that were in them. And what was more interesting is that they noticed me. And so right away, we had a Wendigo show up in my parents' backyard, and I didn't even know what that was. It was like this zombie deer-looking thing, and then right after that, he couldn't get into the house, so he ended up going away. Thank goodness. But I was like, what the heck what is that? It's like Bigfoot's evil older stepbrother. And so then my family went camping, and that was the first time I saw Bigfoot. And I'm turning 6, and we're camping in this huge clearing, like north of the Twin Cities, Minnesota, out in the woods. And it's getting dark, and people are starting to get tents together, and I'm just sitting in the middle of this clearing by one of the fire pits, and I see this orb. My mom walked away for like 30 seconds to hold a steak for my dad, and this orb starts to become like a rainbow, and then this rainbow starts to divide in half, and it's not just a rainbow, it's like neon colored rainbow, and this face pokes out, and I could just smell like rot or death or something, and there's black eyes, and it kind of looks like a beard, and I'm like, oh, are you Jesus back from the dead? It's like, no. And I can hear him talking in my head too. Turns out that Sasquatch are telepathic, as are most of these higher dimensional entities, as far as I can tell. And so he says no, but he knows my name. And he's like, Leah, he's like, they're not taking care of you. He's like, and I love you. and I could feel the love emanating from this being. And he started to step out of this between these rainbows, and so I could kind of catch what he was wearing, and he sounded very human, and I was really, I don't know, entranced by that. And he's like, just come with me and I'll take you away from all this stuff. I'll make sure that nobody ever hurts you again, and they don't deserve you. And I was like, oh, well, that sounds really good, you know? So I let him pick me up. And then immediately I hear God commanding me in my head saying, scream right now. And I'm like, scream? And he's like, do it. And I started screaming. And let me tell you, these, 3-person clearings, they've got to be like 50, 100 feet or something across. So this guy, this Bigfoot guy moves 10-foot steps within less than 30 seconds. And I start screaming, and he kind of is just like, whoop, and he's looking at me, and I'm screaming, and he kind of like holds me and pushes me, and then he kind of like drops me into this tree branch and then starts backing up, and the adults come running over, and my mom was saying, it's just been 30 seconds, not even 30 seconds. And this big guy, he's beckoning to me in the woods, and God's like, don't look at him, don't even talk to him. And where he had just dropped me off in the tree, it was 7 feet off the ground. So my dad had to reach up to grab me. And I was in a dress, and they couldn't, number one, figure out how in a dress a 5-year-old had gotten over 30 feet away in less than 30 seconds, and up a tree, and to the lowest branch, and I didn't scuff anything on my dress. And then my sisters were like, oh my gosh, you smell like you rolled in poo. You smell so horrible. What is that smell? And of course they didn't want to even stay in the tent with me. But the one, my dad's friend, he was like, yeah, and why was she floating? I swear I saw her floating around in the air and floated into the tree. Well, that was because they couldn't see this higher dimensional entity. And it turns out, I was actually told on another occasion that, what we think of is like solid 3D, there's like 1 to 10D, like worth of space, and even more. And each section is a little bit less dense. But it's separate. It has its own critters, its own landscape, its own color band. I don't really understand it that well. However, these higher dimensional beings, some of them are good, some of them are hangry. And the hangry ones, they slow down. And then what I came to figure out later was the Sasquatch was telling me that he would take care of me and make sure that nobody hurt me, because he was going to have himself a Scooby snack. So that was like one of my first times I got to see a Sasquatch. And then like just a few months later, I turned 6 over the summer, and my parents took us out. Our cabin's like near Grand Rapids, Minnesota. And my dad's always looking for somewhere to hunt. He would do stuff. So we went camping and hiking, and my parents were both packing, and they allowed us to, like shoot at a stump. Well, I hit the little tree right behind it and knocked the whole thing over. So my mom was teasing me about being a crack shot. And we keep walking, and suddenly I start hearing these wood knocks, knock, knock. And we come to this clear-cut space. It's a hill on the left side, and there's like mostly forest on the right. And we've got, myself, my older sisters. We have our dog, who's a Labrador, who was a stray that came home, my parents. And I look at the side, and there's there's this stump, like not even 3 feet from us. And then the dog starts barking at it. And then I look again, and it's a Sasquatch boy, and he can't be much older than I was, maybe like a year or two, but he's desperately looking at me and panic in his eyes because I can see him. And he's like, thinking, and he's like, I'm a stump, I'm a stump, I'm a stump. And then I hear this voice from further back in the woods being like, you get home right now, like any, angry mom would. How did you let that malevolent little human see you? And so he's like, and he starts putting his hands over his ears, and the dog's barking. So I'm calming down the dog, and I give him a thumbs up sign, and he takes his hands off his ears in this big sigh of relief. And my sisters are like, ooh, who are you talking to? You got an invisible friend. So they start teasing me. And meanwhile, this poor kid's mom is still yelling at him to get home. And she starts banging on trees or something. And I hear some other voices around. It seems like there's a whole clan somewhere. And he starts moving sideways. And what my sisters saw was this stump moved 10 feet in front of the family. So we're walking, and the stump is moving, and they're like getting really freaked out about this, supernatural stump. And this guy, this poor kid is trying to sneak out of there. He finally did make it back, but he turned around and he looked at me from the trees, and I knew I was going to get in so much trouble with my sisters for this, but I raised up my hand and I waved to him, and then he waved back at me, and then he disappeared. And then it was like the whole forest started with these people, and they're just like, we're going to run them off, and they need to get out of here. And there's a lot of tree banging, and I'm like, can we go? Can we just go? Got a really bad feeling about this. We need to get out of here. And my dad's like, oh, I just want to go a little bit more. And I'm like, I have to go to the bathroom, because that's always what little kids say. And by that point, I actually really did have to go to the bathroom. I felt like maybe it was the infrasound, but I was just starting to feel kind of queasy in my gut a little bit. So we started to head back to the car, and my dad's grumbling a little bit. And then up ahead of us, in part of the bend in the trail, there was this creature, and he was thinking really loud thoughts about how he would take out the adults, and then he could just have his way and take his time with the kids. And I'm like, excuse me, who are you? And he says, I'm a rake. And I was like, you're gonna rake the ground? Is that supposed to be scary? Because with any entity who's being aggressive, you really want to not act like prey, for sure. So he's like, yeah, I'm scary. I'm gonna come. I'm gonna pop out, and I'm gonna scare you. He seemed to keep forgetting that I could hear him, and he looked a lot like Gollum. And it really surprised me when one of my sisters could see him, and she was just like, what is that? And I'm like, it's nothing, just ignore it, pretend it's not there. Well, this creature, this rake, we call them crawlers, or at least I've seen other people write accounts about them, and I think it was actually a crawler. He was starting to get closer, and I was like, dude, you come any closer and I will pull my mom's gun out of her hands, or she had a 22, and I'm like, I will shoot you with it. And he starts laughing at me. He's like, my hide's too tough for that. And I was like, yeah, well, you like your hands, you like your eyesight. Well, And he goes, yeah, why? I said, because you're going to be seeing a little bit more difficultly after I plink you with this gun. And he's like, no, he's like, you're probably not that accurate. And I was like, well, I was accurate enough to, get this tiny tree behind the stump. So I was able to talk myself out of that one. He did back off, but he followed us all the way back. And at one point, he was in front of us in hiding. And I just said, dude, I know you're there. Just go away. Just, okay, dealt with enough today. Just leave me the heck alone. And so we were able, and I said, besides, if we even shoot this off in the air 3 times, it's going to call a ranger, and then they're going to bring backup, and you're not going to like that very much because, they're going to start looking for themselves some critters to take out and have some fun. Because, people they see monsters or whatever, and they're like, and they try and kill it. Or at least that was my perception at that age. So we got away from that one. And, I didn't expect that it would open kind of a Pandora's box too, where, sometimes it seemed like we'd be out and I would see that kid again. And I started asking him about stuff. Like, who are you? Why don't we see you? Why isn't there just more open communication about what's going on? And he would say there's other things going on, and he talked about on one occasion how they came from the stars to the earth too, and they were here before we were, and they're people and we're people, except they call us like malevolent little people, but they're human, and they care about things, and of course their lives are so much more wild than ours are. It's really kind of dog eat dog. You have to be invisible in a world of humans and other creatures that might want to snack on you. And for example, he said he was a 5th dimensional type entity, and most of the parasite type entities that we encounter that find us most interesting, and like you're talking your whatever, like Mothman or whoever else is being different things that are being aggressive, they're all 4D, so they only have to slow down a little bit to get into our space. But he was saying, that they're people too. And from what I understand now, and reading other people's stories and things, that part of them went underground, and those part will just kind of come up and chew on anything. They can portal up here, and they'll chew on anything that isn't moving too fast, and they generally hunt at night. And then the surface ones, they're just kind of like hanging around during the daytime and doing their things, and then they're being invisible as much as possible. I asked him about that, and he said they can bend light around them. And I was like, well, can you show me how to do that? It'd be great for like the bullies at school. But I think it has something to do with the hollowness of their fur. Went to a Bigfoot conference and they were talking about how their hair is hollow on the inside, and I think with how oily it is, it can kind of, it's almost like lubricating it with Vaseline or something, and you can just kind of like, oh, I don't see you, because they're just kind of vibrating too fast, like trying to see a moving fan blade or even like hear a dog whistle. It's out of our range. It's out of our perception when we're moving too slow. Gosh, what else did I ask him? I asked him about origin stories and things, and they had like a great flood story, and they had some of these other stories. And then it was interesting because that kid also said that they knew about Jesus. So at least some of the surface Sasquatch have been, I don't know, they've interacted with us enough to be able to have some of these different, things going on. And they have, ceremonies, and they have elders, and they have, just social structures that I wasn't aware of. And it's pretty interesting. One funny thing that happened, and I mean, we talked briefly, like for a time period, like on and off for a few years, and then I would forget about him, and then God would save me, and then I'd see him again. So during one of those times, we came to the cabin, and he was looking kind of piebald in color rather than like typical dark brown. And I said, well, like, what happened to you? And he said, oh, well, our hair turns white in the winter. And I said, well, where did the Yeti come from then? What's that? And he said, there's no Yeti. There's just Sasquatch. And so then I had to laugh. I was like, well, does that mean that you guys all go to, like go home for Christmas and hang out, in the North Pole with the Yeti and stuff? And he just looked at me. He said, you are the strangest little human I ever met. He's like, no, we don't do that. I think they have like more clan wars and things, and just, they're just more wild in that way that I understand. And I would forget about him. And at one point he was just getting so upset because I don't even want to go there. We started he ended up developing a crush on me, and it was a whole situation, and I totally forgot about it. And he was upset like the next time that I didn't remember him or anything. I actually started remembering things, a lot of my cryptid things, after I got super sick back in 2019, and there was a whole big sea stuff going on, and I started writing about a lot more of my, feeling safe to write about some more of my experiences anyway. This kid, they have names. I don't want to say his name just in case it gets him in trouble.
I was just going to ask you that, but yeah, I understand. Absolutely.
But he started making me Sasquatch marbles. I said, well, just, make a marble and put it at the top or the bottom of the stairs. And I said, someday I'll remember. And he said, well, how will you know that it's a marble? He said, it's really easy. And, for somebody who can freaking bend glass and make a little marble, I can't do that. But apparently they can. Well, I know they can because I have them. And I said, well, the thing with human-made marbles is that we put bits of plastic inside of them. So if you give me a marble that doesn't have anything in it, I'll know that that's a Sasquatch marble. And so he did. Left me some marbles, and that was really cool. I did ask him at one point, I said, is there anything that your people would want us to know? And that was late 70s, early 80s. He said, they were really concerned about us using pesticides. And I didn't understand at the time kind of what he was referencing, but he said that it's not just that you're using the pesticide, it has implications in the environment. And the pesticides are generational, which just means that once they get into an individual, they can cause you to become infertile for like generations. And that's what they found out with some of the Agent Orange and things that were tested in the Philippines. But at the time I was just like, okay, whatever. I'm like, what else do you want us to know? And they said, quit shooting us. We're freaking human. And I was like, well, you're attacking us when we come in the woods. And he's like, yeah, because you're all carrying guns. Or I think they called it fire sticks. He's like, y'all have these fire sticks. And I'm like, I don't have a fire stick. So I said, is there any way? I'm like, can't you just like use 4D materials to mark humans somehow? Can't you put a scarf around our necks or something? Or he's like, yeah, maybe a cape. I'm like, seriously? Yeah. Or like an armband or something. And so, yeah, I've heard from other accounts that Sasquatch do mark people, friendly humans who are coming in the woods. And so I assume that's like researchers and people who telepathically communicate with them so that they're not all just like, being eaten. And saying that, obviously, they can tell what your motivation is because, they can feel it coming off of you and in your energy, and probably how much energy you're giving off, because a high vibrational person is just happy and they've got a light energy about them. And somebody who's just stalking the woods, I'm gonna bag me a Bigfoot, is just gonna be like, Garr, sorry, that's my redneck accent.
No, I love it.
Which I shouldn't laugh about because I'm kind of living in the sticks of Duluth. So.
Right.
I'm allowed. Hopefully nobody's offended. What else? Did they want us to know? Oh, this is really silly. This kid said that he's like, can you just not call us Bigfoot? He's like, we don't run around calling you all Big Nose. And I said, well, what should we call you? And he said, well, Sasquatch is okay, or Alma, or, Nirvana people. And I was like, Nirvana? He said, yeah. I'm like, okay. So when there was a book that came out. It was called Bigfoot Exposed, the Nirvana People. And I was reading that, and I think it was like Lawrence Leavell or something. Their experiences mirrored a lot of what my experiences mirrored. They do falconry, not in the wintertime because the hawks migrate, but they will train like hawks and things to get food for them. And it's so fascinating. They have words. The one he said, he's like, well, if you ever get in trouble, he's like, say this word, it's knock. And he's telling me telepathically. And I said, knock, like knock, knock, who's there? And he's like, no, like knock, more like hawk. And then he actually spoke it, and it was incredibly difficult. I cannot even say that word. It's like, you have to think of a person who has a cleft palate. So they're speaking from the way back in their throat. Like, no. kind of like that. But even that's not how long the word is. It's a very guttural kind of a word. That's every time I try to say it, he just laughed at me. He's like, you're going to have to think it rather than say it, because nobody's going to be ever able to understand that. But that was, a cool thing that he did say. So, yeah, I did forget a lot about him. At one point, we had friends up at the cabin, and the one kid says, "Oh my gosh, there's there's a Bigfoot back there," and he made a footprint, and so he took a cast, and it was an over 16-inch cast, and so that he must have been about, I don't know, 10, 12 years old, maybe about 8 feet tall at that point. And our neighbor kid's parents insisted that he had made the cast and there is no such thing, and everything like that. But I'll tell you, the Bigfoot kid would come into our cabin and start, causing mischief. He finished a puzzle that my sister was working on, and he got, this gooey, oily residue all over it, so it made it smell bad. And then she came out and she totally accused me of doing it, and it was a really difficult puzzle. It was a little bit. It would have taken me a lot longer to have finished it. And then we were eating Fruit Loops, and my mom was trying to get Fruit Loops to one of these squirrels that would come begging at the front door. And so the squirrel would run back up to a tree, and he'd stick the Fruit Loop in a hole in the tree, and then start eating them. And the Sasquatch kid saw it. So he's sitting there taking handfuls of the Fruit Loops. Felt very ill afterwards. Fruit Loops are not good for Sasquatch. They're not good for anybody, but they're not good for Sasquatch. And I did ask him what his favorite foods were at one point too. And of course, I think everybody knows that they like peanut butter. They like bananas. They like fruit. But did you know that they like star fruit? They like dragon fruit. They like, as a kid, and I'd never heard of dragon fruit or star fruit or any kind of interesting fruit like that. And I said, well, how about an orange? And he said, well, no citrus. And I was like, well, why not? And he said, it's not polite to ask. And I was like, okay, pretend I'm just a stupid human kid and who really wants to know what's up, and just freaking tell me why you can't eat citrus. And apparently he was on the runs. And so that was my very bad manners to insist on saying that. I could feel disapproval from the entire clan when I asked that question, because they could all they didn't talk to me necessarily, but they could all hear me and put out these, ooze like indignation when I would say stuff or do stuff about or just ask crazy stuff like that. Like, I said, well, shouldn't we have better communication? And I said, can't you just like have kids go to like a 2-week immersion camp for languages like they do here in Minnesota? There's a few really good language camps. And somebody I met recently was like, I got kidnapped for a year. And got to hang out with a Sasquatch, and I was so embarrassed. I was like, I didn't mean for them to take people for a year, but
Wait,
I also read that.
Sorry, you said you know someone who was kidnapped by Sasquatch for a year?
Yes, they said that they were Sas, and we're talking like ex-military, very honest type personality. He totally, the type, they don't lie. When they say something, they are dead serious, and I believe him, them, her, them. Yeah, that individual. They do not want to. I don't see them ever wanting to talk really about any of it publicly, or I'd put you onto I'd have them come ask to get a hold of you.
And sorry,
They're not.
to clarify that, when you're saying that, who exactly are you referring to?
Oh, the person who got
Okay, gotcha.
taken by the Sasquatch is not interested in public comments, like pretty much ever. They just want to be left alone.
I could try to definitely understand that. I mean, going through something like that's got to be highly traumatic. If they ever do need someone to talk to, I'd even off record, off air, I would offer my services for that. But what an interesting situation. I've never heard anything like that. Feel free to continue. Definitely have been thinking of a few questions along the way, but I want to make sure that you're able to get everything out that you have in your mind.
Okay. Yeah, I got older and moved on with my life. I moved to Colorado, and there was one time, maybe around 2004 or 5, that we were in Cripple Creek on a train ride, and there was a young Sasquatch who was just kind of like hanging out, and he was so engorged in grabbing some ants or something that somebody else was able to get a picture of him. I didn't, because I didn't have a phone on me or anything. But that was really cool. And then I started remembering a little bit more about, what had happened when I was a kid. And during the last 2 stories, most recently, so for Christmas 2023, I went with my family, like north of Duluth, Minnesota, to get a Christmas tree. And I brought a couple of apples, and then I was just, thanking the Sasquatch in the area. I don't hear anything right now, but I can think really, really loudly. So I was just saying thank you. Here's some apples. Stay away from humans, especially ones who look like they might be interested in doing experiments. And as we were going home, it felt like time was compressing. We got home about 15 minutes faster than we left, and we weren't driving faster, but I felt like time was being compressed, and we were starting to get this tree in the house. And the 9-year-old says, she says, "Mom, it feels like there's a huge man in the house." She's like, "I'm really scared of him." And I said, "Well, if there's a huge man in the house, then he knows that he needs to be respectful, and he's not going to hurt you or anything." But I had inherited all the marble toys from my parents' house, and suddenly these old little marbles, these Sasquatch marbles, showed up at the top and the bottom of the stairs not 2 minutes later. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, they're around." And that just felt really good, just to know that there's, hopefully we can all start to learn to get along, is my thought. That was the happy recent memory. And then the not so happy recent memory was the next spring we went camping at Jay Cook State Park, just south of Duluth, and we had a camper. Everybody's asleep. And one of the things that I've learned over the years is that parasite higher dimensional entities will telepathically kind of order you to come to them. We hear it as a subliminal message. And so all of a sudden it's like, wow, I really need to go to the bathroom, or I should go sit on that rock by myself, or check out that trail. Or I was just curious. So if you ever get one of these real strong urges to go do something, especially by yourself, I would check that and not listen, because it's probably some kind of aggressive entity. There's Bigfoot out there, but there's a lot more aggressive entities out there than they are. And so we're in this camper. It's springtime. It's like maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and suddenly I wake up and I have to go to the loo. And I'm just like, where did that come from? And I hear 2 birds whistling. And I was like, only the second one just flipped the 2 sounds. So that's my first connection. And then the second, they sound like someone like my mom used to when she was trying to whistle the birds to her. And it was like too close, but it didn't sound like a bird. And then third, we're in this little clearing camping. And the noises are coming from an area where there weren't any tree branches. And it's not a bird that's awake during nighttime anyway. So I was just like, screw that. So I kept, deciding that I didn't have to go to the bathroom, and they kept calling, and the silence was there. People probably have talked about the silence.
Oh yeah.
Everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Everything just becomes like somebody turned the volume off, and all the little night crickets are gone. No cicadas, no nothing, except these 2 bird whistles. And so that was my last tip off, that I better not get myself out of there. And at first I was just like, oh, maybe some friendly Sasquatch people, I could just go out there, because I had made myself a dream catcher to, I was having issues with a dogman around the house being aggressive. And so I had this, I now keep this dream catcher around, and I was like, oh, they won't bother me because I have the dream catcher. Well, I kind of went, it's more like, asking to get yourself into trouble. And I didn't. And about 4:30 in the morning, they finally went away. And then all the noises came back in. Like there were birds, there were squirrels chittering, it was like a symphony. So I went outside, and then I was looking around, and then I found that, later I found that Sasquatch footprint, that with a narrow heel, and it was pretty imprinted on that. The area was, it wasn't soft ground, but there still was a bit of an imprint, and I had somebody kind of measure by. I put my hand across where the ball of the foot would have been, and they said that it was probably about 22 inches with that print. And so I spent the rest of the weekend, just deciding to be with everybody. And I did have a vision that night, one of the nights, that it was 2 Sasquatch who were going to grab me and then trade me to some other aggressive entities in the river for fresh fish. And then that would have nullified any effects of this dream catcher, which basically is a do not eat this food sign. Nobody's supposed to bother the person who has the dream catcher. But if, the entities in the river got the food from the forest, and the Bigfoot Sasquatchmen weren't planning on hurting the person, me, from there, then it was a win-win for them, like everybody. And that park is right next to a reservation, so I suspect that they are pretty used to doing that with any of the indigenous that are still living around there. So, even if you have a dream catcher or you're using salt or anything, it's not okay to just go wandering around off in the woods at night. It's kind of one of the things that I wanted to mention to everybody. Don't get cocky.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
I want to ask a question real quick regarding that, because that is something that comes up on the show quite a
Really?
bit. Oh yeah, I can think of multiple times where people say they have been told telepathically to go out by themselves to an area to go camping, so they can go, so they can meet with them or meet them. I've heard it a few times, but you're saying that from what you found, that is never really a good idea, and that's never going to be an actual Bigfoot that is telling you that. It could be something else.
Not exactly.
Okay.
Remember, there's two types, or two split of groups as far as I can tell. There's the group of Bigfoot or Sasquatch who went underground, who are living like in inner earth.
Sure.
And the inner earth rules are like anything on the surface is fair game. And they like to come out at night. So these two that were after me, I think, were the nighttime variety. The other ones called them the bad Sasquatch. And I'm like, why are they bad? They're just bad. And I'm like, okay. But the Sasquatch who are wandering around during the day, and if you were to like hear something in the forest, or you kind of do that, I suspect that they would be more welcoming, more of the legit, yeah, we want to live in peace. I really do think most of the surface, probably the ones underneath too, want to live in peace, but their idea of peace is that we just like hang out and wait for them to eat us. Whereas my idea of peace is that we, all work together to figure out better solutions where, we can be civilized, and we have beyond beef options now, and we can start making food that is more in mass if we ask for help from some of the nicer, aliens, ETs, whatever, entities that are out there. And when, the planet's spinning faster, we're spinning faster, I think it's making us sync up. I do think that the silence comes from us kind of syncing up out of 3D into 4D a little bit almost, and it brings us out of the 3D plane. But I think also the planet's spinning faster. I think we're getting cosmic and solar radiation upgrades, and it's making our junk DNA activate. And I think pretty much all humans are going to start seeing and hearing like telepathically and into the higher dimensions here within the next few years, maybe sooner. Maybe people already are. So yeah, to answer the question, no, I don't think they're all going to be aggressive and try and eat you. And yes, if people are cautious, they should, follow their gut and their friends, and listen to their friends, and just be cautious. I know homeowners from a Bigfoot conference that I went to who have been leaving stuff outside their home and have developed a relationship with the Sasquatch. And they say, yes, they have mind speak, and, they feel comfortable being out. But, and sometimes, you'll get rocks thrown at you. And it's, I think, because the Sasquatch are trying to scare people out of the forest before, the other more aggressive beings come around. And whether that's a mythical folk, whether that's some kind of, I don't know, dinosaur, cryptid, there's all kinds of things out there. And unfortunately, I've met a bunch of them, so I know.
Yeah, the trick is figuring out which type of Sasquatch then you're dealing with. if you follow that
Exactly.
train of thought. It's very, very
Yeah, I
interesting.
would. Yeah, ones that start moving around that portal up here at night or around dawn or dusk. Now, if I've heard accounts of gifts being left, flowers, feathers, that sort of thing. Those are genuine acts of, saying hi to the neighbors and hello, we're here. And, I know not everyone suggests that you should actually go out and be feeding and offering Bigfoot or Sasquatch your help, but for heaven's sake, if one was in trouble or any of that, you should definitely offer help. And then remembering that they are higher dimensional things are more radioactive too, so take precautions against that. If you have an encounter, like you can, at the worst, you can drink a beer and that'll help you flush your system. But I mean, taking milk thistle and doing energy work, Reiki work, and just, eating well, that sort of thing can help you. Kombucha too, just any of those things, because you don't want to get those strange cancers later.
Absolutely. And kombucha is just, I mean, that's a great drink overall for, your health. That's a to the side thing. At least I think so. I like it. What if there are listeners that are like, wow, how do I try to reach out to a Sasquatch? Do you have any advice how a person could start that journey to try to reach out themselves?
As I've heard other people say, there was a Native American on a different show who said, or indigenous, who said that she would announce telepathically, I'm here and I'm going to do this in the forest, or I'm going to this point and then I'm coming back. And that's what I'm doing. So, just kind of announce your intentions, announce that you are peaceful. Those things that they use that Dr. Greer talks about for connecting with aliens, the CE5, you can kind of do the same thing and watch out for an all out. If you say some stuff, it's almost like inviting all the good stuff and the bad stuff, carte blanche. So pay attention. If you're hearing like tree knocks, that's them saying, look, you're in our space. And if I were to hear a tree knock, I would keep some fruit on me, like apples, and I would just kind of stick an apple off and be like, sorry, see you later, and just kind of like put that off in there. And an apple's not going to be too much littering in there. I wouldn't do peanut butter, unless you wanted to just take a slab of peanut butter and put it on a leaf or something where, but to just say, hey, look, I'm here, and be thinking and be positive and be open-minded is probably the best thing. They do like nuts. They like berries. They like blueberries. But if you do putting it out to the forest, and I've heard this on other shows, that expect them to come back to your house and be peeking through the windows and checking you out, and it's scary. There is a vibration with higher dimensional entities that makes you want to crap your pants. It made me want to. It was like a hollow feeling in my gut that just this feeling of dread just all the way down my back, and and terror. And I would have to like think of myself scooping it up, throwing it into a sack, putting the sack over my shoulder and being like, okay, it's there, but I'm just going to focus on what's going on with me. And once I could do that, then I could just interact with, you know, them or whatever else entity.
It's interesting you brought that up, where, you know, you go out, you have these connections, there's a high likelihood that you may bring something home, because that is something that is brought up over and over and over again in witness interviews on this podcast. I'm sure that you probably in a way already answered this, but is there a way to really break it down? You know, why you think that, hey, why is it that this happened? You know, these people are having these interactions with Bigfoot out in the field, but then they get home and then all of a sudden they see stuff start to move around. They have shadow people, all sorts of weird stuff that might not necessarily be Bigfoot related.
Because when you start to see, so if you think about a Bigfoot being a fifth dimensional creature, and you are a third dimensional creature in, well, whatever, we're moving up, but third dimensional creature meets a fifth dimensional creature, they start to move up in vibration. That's enough in vibration for everything else to notice them. And the Bigfoot or the Sasquatch people are just going to be as curious about you as you are about them. And they are interested in peace, and they are interested in connecting with people who are peaceful. They don't want to be hunted. You know, they want to have a place to call home and to feel safe and to, you know, as I understand it, Sasquatch and Native Americans, you know, there was some of them before they got killed even spoke Native American language. Over in Vancouver in that area, and it was right about that time that Mount St. Helens conveniently blew up, and there have been hints that perhaps those Sasquatch were taken out and then removed, because some of them were seen being taken out by helicopter when that area was hidden out. And that's kind of things that I've listened to in my own personal opinion. That's not something that I can factually take you to. But I believe that they do have some written language. I believe that they take Native Americans and are having them learn the language again so that we can communicate. As you know, everything, like I said, as everybody starts to wake up a little bit and see what's really going on around us, and we can start talking to our cosmic neighbors.
That is really interesting. Thank you for breaking that down again. There's something you said a lot earlier in the show that I thought was really interesting and very unique. I hadn't heard it before. And you had said that the individual Sasquatch that you've been talking to had told you that they actually have the equivalent of a great flood myth in their culture as well, which you find in many different cultures throughout the world. Do you remember any specifics about how he told that story to you?
I was asking him what his views were about God, and if he knew Jesus and whatnot, and the stories specifically, I cannot give the specifics, but I can just refer you back to the book, the Bigfoot Exposed, the Nirvana People, because when I was reading through it, that author also was writing down some of the stories. And when I was reading them, I was like, oh yeah, that's what they kind of said. But it was just my recollection is from way back in the early 80s.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
I was a kid, and I was, just not knowing, not understanding how I could be talking to entities that supposedly didn't exist, and understanding that if I said anything, I was likely to be taken to a psych ward for evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
Maybe not by my parents, but just anybody in society.
Right.
There's just fear.
You've mentioned multiple times where there's been communication back and forth. Have all those times been telepathic communication then, or have there been times when it's not been telepathic?
That was telepathic,
Okay,
all of it.
gotcha.
Yeah, which I I'm too low in vibration right now to hear telepathically, unless something is being aggressive and actually talking to me, and then I can hear that. But I don't hear anything else.
So that actually brings up a thought I had, but that I lost for a few seconds, which is, so you're saying that, let me think if I can kind of put this together. So we raise our vibrations in order to have contact, but there are times when the level can drop, and so that you don't have that contact anymore. Is that correct?
Yes, in which case it's more of a empathic, energetic thing. I think most humans, if you think of us like a lot of little light bulbs, we all kind of glow,
Mm-hmm.
kind of relative to each other. Some a little more, some a little less. But if you're in a higher dimension and vibrating faster, then those humans are highly, highly sought after by, clandestine government programs, by beneficial entities who are looking to um, basically, I don't even know how to say it, just increase their bloodlines, using, just it's basically a big floating farm ball of fun and experimentation is what our world is. And so if you're in a higher vibration, so you've got negative entities really wanting to snack on you, you've got positive entities wanting to, check out your DNA and gather data and kind of everything in between. There's just a lot of curiosity over us and, our spiritual beliefs. And we've got so many different kinds of junk, ET alien DNA in us that, it's, we're we're just kind of interesting.
No, absolutely. I would say there's always, I think you could almost say, spiritual warfare that is going on in the background that we cannot see. And yeah, it's very interesting to think about. Just in the last few minutes, so to raise frequency, things like meditation, things like that would be used. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah, gotcha.
Even happy thoughts or hanging out with other people who are in a higher vibration. Just listening to music that's in 528 hertz, because most of the music is in 440, and that's in a dissonant hertz range for our bodies. But if we listen to stuff in like 432 hertz or 528 hertz, the solfeggio frequencies helps us get in a higher vibration.
It's extremely interesting. I just want to say, Leah, thank you so much for coming on the show. I want to make sure that you were able to share everything that you'd wanted to share today. It's been a really interesting conversation, and a lot of things have been brought up that I don't think have been brought up on the show before.
Well, I hope that's a good thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I don't think I have anything else that I really feel led to say, except that we're not alone, and our cosmic cousins are just waiting for us to notice them, stand up and say, yeah, we want to live the Star Trek existence. We want help. And we don't want to be snacked on anymore. We don't need that anymore. There's better things that we can do. There's more that we can be than just, the super size on somebody's snack list, for sure. And the reason why we are is because nobody knows. And if you don't know, you can't say no. Does that make sense?
There you go. Yep. I think that's a great way to say it. But, Leah, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Definitely, keep in touch. You have my email. If anything else, interesting happens, I'd love to hear about it. But, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeremiah. It was fun.
Just wanted to take a minute to say thank you for listening to this episode of the Bigfoot Society podcast. Leah's story is one that lingers, not just because of the rainbow portal or the 22-inch print in the forest clearing, but because of what it reveals about the hidden layers of the world that we think we know. So huge thanks to Leah for her honesty and for reminding us that sometimes it's not just about believing in Bigfoot, it's about understanding what believes in us. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to us on YouTube, hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next one, and share this with a friend who's into Sasquatch, higher dimensions, or encounters that leave a mark. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you're following the show there. If you could leave us a 5-star positive review and rating, it helps more people discover these stories. And if you've had an encounter, especially in Minnesota, Colorado, or anywhere around the world, I would love to hear it. Please email me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Big changes are coming soon to Bigfoot Society. They kick off on August 8th. Friday, we'll be launching a new membership community through Supercast. And hey, some of you might actually be able to check it out early and sign up if you go over to BigfootSocietyPodcast.com and check out the members login area. But you'll hear more about that as we get closer to the 8th. So thanks again for following along with the Bigfoot Society. And until next time, keep your eyes open, trust your gut, and never stop asking what else might be out there, and see you in the woods.